Hey everyone, and welcome back to Activist Toolkit from the Girls Who Code at Home project. If you found yourself in part 4 and you haven't done parts 1, 2, or 3, I will take you onto our webpage where you can find those right now. All right, from our homepage, you can go to Teen Central. Scroll down here till you find Teens Learn Online, and then you'll see this link for Girls Who Code at Home. And all the videos for the past parts of the project can be found here, along with the link to the activity PDF, which you will need, right? And if you want to open that up for the current project, we'll just go back to Teen Central, find our virtual programs here. Click on Girls Who Code at Home, and then you can find the activity PDF for part 4, which is the one we'll be doing today right here. Already got mine open up here at the top, so you can go ahead and open yours. All right, and if you're ready for part 4, this is where we're going to start doing our intro to CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets. Okay, and those are kind of rules for how we're going to apply the HTML elements that we put in last week. So when we added in all that text and images, and all those tags, what we can do now is start modifying them with color and sizing and positioning and all of that stuff. So that's what we're going to do today. Okay. Going to go ahead and today, instead of doing a lot of stuff with the Google Slides, we will be working primarily from the activity PDF right here and in Trinket again, which we did last week, because we'll be working directly with the code. All right. You can go ahead and open up this link to Trinket and go ahead and sign in and then pull up your trinkets. So I've got mine right here. Already signed in, and under my trinkets I found this one. So this is what I was working with last week. Then we'll go back in here. You'll also want to have your mock-up ready. You may have put some information in there that you can pull directly from your Google Slides and put into your documents. If you did it on paper, you'll have to look that information up. We'll want to have, like I said, we already pulled up our project from last week. So our code from last week, and then there's the example code. You go ahead and click on this link, and it'll bring you to this document here, which has all kinds of information in the style sheet, which is what we'll be using to do CSS. We'll be able to copy and paste the stuff from here into our own project and make those changes so you don't have to learn or type out all the code yourself. Okay. Look at that frame again. We're going to go ahead and start off with our usual Women in Tech spotlight. I'm actually going to go ahead and do it right from here. All right. So this is Chieko Asakawa, and she lost her sight at 14 after a swimming accident that she'd had. It injured her eyes. And she found that all the things she used to be able to do on her own before that had been simple, she had tons of trouble doing on her own, but she was still wanted to be very independent. So she started creating technology that could help her as a visually impaired person to continue interacting with the world the way she used to, or as close to it as she could. Okay, so she's worked with the IBM research team. She developed a digital library for Braille documents. She created some text-to-speech plugins to help visually impaired people when they're on the internet. She continues to work as an IBM fellow, and she's currently working on a project right now to help visually impaired people travel independently. So it uses artificial intelligence to kind of recognize objects out in the real world, people, their expressions, where to go with navigation systems, distances, things like that. And we're going to watch a video where she will actually talk about her experiences and then kind of show you a demo of that project that she's working on. Now this video right here, I couldn't get this link to work, so we're actually going to be watching her TED Talk video. And if you want to, you can also read the BBC article that's linked right here.
You might think there are many things that I can't do because I cannot see. That's largely true, Actually, I just needed to have a bit of help to come up to the stage. But there is also a lot that I can do. This is me, rock climbing for the first time. Actually, I love sports, and I can play many sports, like swimming, skiing, skating, scuba diving, running, and so on. But there is one limitation. Somebody needs to help me. I want to be independent. I lost my sight at the age of 14 in a swimming pool accident. I was an active, independent teenager, and suddenly I became blind. The hardest thing for me was losing my independence. Things that until then seemed simple became almost impossible to do alone. For example, one of my challenges was textbooks. Back then, there were no personal computers, no internet, no smartphones. So I had to ask one of my two brothers to read me textbooks. And I had to create my own books in Braille. Can you imagine? Of course, my brothers were not happy about it. And later, I noticed they were not there whenever I needed them. I think they tried to stay away from me. I don't blame them. I really wanted to be freed from relying on someone. That became my strong desire to ignite innovation. Jump ahead to mid-1980s. I got to know cutting-edge technologies. And I thought to myself, how come there is no computer technologies to create books in Braille? These amazing technologies must be able to also help people with limitations like myself. That's the moment my innovation journey began. I started developing digital book technologies such as digital Braille editor, digital Braille dictionary, and the digital Braille library network. Today, every student who is visually impaired can read textbooks by using personal computers and mobile devices in Braille or in voice. This may not surprise you, since everyone now has digital books in their tablets in 2015. But Braille went digital many years before digital books, already in the late 1980s, almost 30 years ago. Strong and specific needs of the blind people made this opportunity to create digital books way back then. And this is actually not the first time this happened, because history shows us accessibility ignites innovation. The telephone was invented while developing a communication tool for hearing impaired people. Some keyboards were also invented to help people with disabilities. Now I'm going to give you another example from my own life. In the 90s, people around me started talking about the internet and web browsing. I remember the first time I went on the web. I was astonished. I could access newspapers at any time and every day. I could even search for any information by myself. I desperately wanted to help the blind people have access to the internet. And I found ways to render the web into synthesized voice, which dramatically simplified the user interface. This led me to develop the homepage reader in 1997, first in Japanese and later translated into 11 languages. When I developed the homepage reader, I got many comments from users. One that I strongly remember said, "For me, the internet is the small window to the world." It was a revolutionary moment for the blind. The cyber world became accessible, and this technology that we created for the blind has many uses way beyond what I imagined. It can help drivers listen to their emails, or it can help you listen to recipe while cooking. Today, I'm more independent, but it is still not enough. For example, when I approached the stage just now, I needed assistance. My goal is to come up here independently, and not just here. My goal is to be able to travel and do things that are simple to you. Okay, now let me show you the latest technologies. This is a smartphone app that we are working on.
51 feet to the door, and keep straight. Take the 2 doors to go out. The door is on your right. Nick is approaching. Looks so happy.
Oh, hi, Nick.
Hey, Chieko.
Where are you going? You look so happy.
Oh, well, my paper just got accepted.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Thanks. Wait, how'd you know it was me and that I look happy? All right.
Hi.
He is not talking to you, but on his phone. Potato chips. Dark chocolate with elements. You gained 5 pounds since yesterday. Please take apple instead of chocolate. Approaching. You arrived.
So as you can see, she's continuing to work on and tackle new problems for herself and for others like her with technology. We're going to go back to the PDF, and you can take a look at the reflect section here. So this question deals with one of the 4 traits the Girls Who Code likes to try and build, which is bravery, resilience, creativity, and purpose. So you're going to think about what you might do or feel if you were in her position when she lost her eyesight, and think about some of the ways that she displayed bravery in face of that challenge. So you can take some time now to write down some thoughts, share it with friends or family, however you want to do. I'll give you a few seconds and then we'll move on to the first couple steps. All right, so before we jump into those steps, I'm going to show you one last slide, and that's this here. So today we're going to take our code that we worked on from last time that should look a little bit like this. Get some nav links, your text, and your images all straight down that left side. And we're going to turn it into something that looks a little bit more like this. So you've got your colors, you've got your specific text, your images are arranged differently, and your nav bar looks like a navigational bar, okay? So that's what's going to be possible today. We're going to go ahead and jump back to the PDF and get started. And step 1 is really simple. We're just going to look at this PDF part here. Okay. So HTML and CSS work together. HTML is kind of like the bones, the skeletons of your website. It puts the absolute bare minimum on there, and CSS comes in and fills it out, makes it look pretty, okay? So you can see it from these little Lego figures here. So your CSS, like I mentioned before, the cascading style sheets, they kind of give rules to the rest of the documents that they then apply, and it changes little bits of the HTML elements. So like it says here, if you want to make your text larger or smaller, you do that using CSS, and use a CSS rule that then tells the rest of your document to change that size, that color, the type of font, all of those things. Now, if you look at, and I will pull it up in just a second, if you look at your project and trinket that you've used from the Girls Who Code, you'll notice that in addition to the index.html, take action.html, and about.html, you had a tab that says style.css. Okay, and that is where we're going to be doing all of our CSS style rules. I'm going to take a look at that right here. So it's this tab right here, the style.css. And it's got spaces for us to modify everything from the body, the header, the main, to our different headings, paragraphs, all of that stuff. And it gives us little comments telling us what we need to put in there. Okay, but that's primarily where we're going to be adding a ton of code today. All right. So we're going to look at our first rule set to just kind of get a little familiar with how HTML and CSS differ. Okay, so I know it says purple here, but it really means orange, and that's why the color is orange. So when you're looking at it, it's asking, what does the orange text do? What do you think the green text does? And why do these two images look different even though all of the same words and pieces are in both examples? I'll give you just a few seconds to think about that, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so hopefully you've had a little think about this. And really, we're going to look at the orange text first. So obviously, this says background color. And then we've got a color value. So it's trying to, in some way, change the background color. We see that in example 2 it worked, in example 1 it didn't. The background is still white. Okay. This green text here is a comment. We saw those last time around in the code. So it won't show up in the results panel, but it tells you what to put in this area. Okay. Now the problem and the difference between the two is that this information is not inside of these brackets here. And that's why it didn't render the background over here blue, but it did in this one, because this one is inside of this body tag. And that's important because if you just put that back there, it doesn't know what you want to make blue. It doesn't know which background you're talking about. You have to specify the body background. We're going to talk a little bit about rule sets, and that's what CSS uses to do all of what you just saw. Okay, so this here, the orange text that we saw, is a property name. So it's indicating which property needs to be changed. And then this is the value, so this is the value of what is being changed. Okay. Now right here it's using the word blue, but you can also use the hex values that we talked about when we created our mockups in part 2. So you should have chosen a color scheme and what different colors you might have wanted to apply to your text and your background and different things like that. Those hex codes could go here and change your black background. Okay. Like we mentioned above, these properties are only useful if your browser knows which elements to apply them to, and that's why this information had to go inside the body bracket like you see here. Right. So you have to make sure it's inside that rule set, and that's kind of what this sets up. So your rule set is made up of a selector, which is this here. It tells it what specifically we are selecting to change. And then a declaration block is the entire bit of information. It's got the selector and the property value that you want to change. Okay, and like we said, green text is comment, it doesn't show up. We are going to apply a background color, but first let's look at this. Okay, so it talks about that there are 3 different ways of selecting an element to change with CSS. And the simplest one is to start with the element selector. So the body, very simple. It's an element from HTML that we are using and specifically deciding to change. In this case, we're looking at the HTML from the cute baby animals example from last time around. We've got this text that's in the H2 tag. We've also got this text in the H2 tag, and then we've got 2 sections that are under the P or paragraph tag. Okay. Now, if we want to make some changes to our H2 tags, or the text that is tagged as H2, then we're going to go into our style sheet. We're going to put that H2, put those brackets so we know we're starting a new rule set, and then we're going to add the property values that we want to change. So in this case, we want to change font size, font weight, and color. And what that will end up looking like is this over here. So obviously the color of the H2 text has changed, but the color and size of the paragraph text has not, and that's because we didn't specify over here that we wanted to do anything to the paragraph text. So that's why the rule set only deals with the element that you've placed here. All right, we will get to do some of this. First, we're going to start out by putting in that background color. Okay, so we're going to go into the project, not our own project that we're working inside of, but we're going to go inside the example code for part 4. We're going to go into that style CSS. and we're going to find the information in the body section. So if you look back at the PDF, we want to take the height information, the box sizing information, and the background color. And that's all right here. Now there's more in there. So it talks about font families in between the two brackets. So I will have to put in a bracket on the other page just to make sure I've closed off the declaration. But I can go ahead and put it inside my project. Oh, there we go. See, I duplicated that. So it's not rendering because I had an error in my code. There we go. Now that I've deleted that second bracket, it's showing my background is blue. All right. But maybe I don't want mine blue. So when I was working on my project, blue was not the color I had in mind for my background. I chose some different colors and I wrote down their hex code. So what I'm going to do is change my hex code now, and you can do the same. All right, see? So I wanted to use a light pink color for my background. And that's my hex color code, F2CBBD. Okay. And because we just put it as body, and because there's a body section on every page, it will show up like that on all of my pages. So as we can see, the index page, the take action page, and the about page all have the background color of pink. So go ahead now, and if you haven't already, copy that information from the example style sheet here, paste it into your style sheet in the body section, and then go ahead and change the background color so it matches the color you have on your mockup. And once you've done that, we will move on to working with our text. Okay, we're going to head back over to our PDF and take a look at step 3, which is styling our text. Okay. So in this section, we'll be looking at the elements that deal with our header values. So header 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, 5, or 6, if you chose to include those different sizes, and our paragraph tags. Okay. And the first step in doing this is to import the fonts that we chose in step or part 2 when we worked on our mockup. Okay, so remember we worked in Google Fonts, and we're going to have to go back to Google Fonts to pull up the information that we want, the fonts that we want, and move that over into our code. Okay, so you may have already put the link for your fonts inside of your mockup. I did not, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to Google Fonts. And then the font family that I really liked was called Oswald. And that's right here. So I'm going to select this font. And you may remember doing this and looking at this page where we have different weights and values, glyphs, things like that. What we're going to do to go ahead and get the information we need to put in our style sheet is click select the style. It's going to show you all over here. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these different weights of my font. Whether I use them or not, I'm not sure yet, but I'll put them in there. And since I've already got it on the same page, I'm going to go ahead and go down here to my popular pairings and choose the one that I wanted from last time. Now, if you decided to pair a couple fonts that are not listed on the popular pairings, what you'll do is you'll get the information for your first font from the Embed tab, put that in, and then you can do it for a second one, just by looking for it the same way that we did look for Oswald. Okay. So the next part, once we've got all of the versions that we want to use right here, we're going to click on this Embed tab, and it's going to show us 2 bits of information. So there's a link here, which what we'll do is we'll put this into each page of our website that we're working on in Trinket. And essentially it does the same thing as when we uploaded the pictures that we used last week. So we had to upload them into Trinket so that we could link them into the pages. Otherwise, they would be broken links, right? So basically what this does is it puts the link for these fonts in your pages so that it's there and it can draw on it when it's rendering the page. You've also got the CSS rules that specify this. Okay, and we'll look at something a little like this inside the activity PDF. For now, I'm going to copy this link. I'm going to go back to my website in Trinket, and I'm going to place it into the correct spot. So we should be up at the top, okay? You're going to look for the comment. Sorry about that. You're going to look for the comment that says add your Google fonts here. Okay, and that means that's the correct place to put it. If you deleted this or you don't have this information here anymore, it'll be inside the head tag up at the top. So you want to make sure it comes before this closing tag, but you can put it here or here, it doesn't matter. Okay. So we're going to paste that information in. You won't see any changes yet because we've put those fonts into the document, but we haven't specified with our CSS which elements, like our header tags or our paragraph tags, that will modify. So we'll put it into each page, and I don't know why they're like that. Okay, we're going to paste that there, and then we'll go in the About page as well. All right, so now we have our font family inside of our project. We're going to go back now and look at the PDF. And we're going to look at some of the relevant properties for text and fonts. So this is the one that it showed inside Google Fonts up here, and it refers to the font family. So you want to specify when you're talking about which section, like your header 1 or your paragraph, which one of those is going to be Roboto or Oswald. And so you'll put in font family, which is your property name. You'll put in your property value, which is the name of the font you're using. And then you can include this, which is the generic family name. And basically what that does, and it mentions it here, is that it creates a fallback. So if the browser that someone's using to access your website doesn't have that font available to it, then it will do a fallback font specified here. Roboto is a sans serif font. So basically I'm saying if you don't have that font, just pick the next best sans serif that you have, and that's what it will do. Okay. You can also change your font size, and there are a couple different ways that you can do that. You'll use your property name, which is the font -size, your colon, and then you can put a value in using PX, EM, CM, or you can just simply go small, medium, or large. Obviously, small, medium, and large have different values that you aren't necessarily deciding, so it might be easier to do a pixel size. You can do text alignment, which again, the property name is text align. You have to type it in exactly like this, and then you can decide if you want it to be all on the left, or if you want all your text to be on the right, if you want it to be in the center of the page. And justified is a little hard to explain. It deals with spacing in the lines and trying to fill up the space. So you can play around with that if you want to see what it does. But in most cases, you'll probably use left, right, or center. Okay, and we're also going to deal with changing the color of the text. And so it, very similar to how we did the background color, it just says color here, but you can actually put text dash color, things like that, to make sure that it knows which value you're talking about. And you can use the color keyword like teal. You can use the hex colors like we've got here, or RGB colors, which we didn't really look at. So you probably won't use those, but that is another option. Now, if you have any questions, and this is all seeming a little confusing, a lot of information, you can go ahead and click on any of these Learn More links. And those will take you to the W3 Schools page that we looked at last week, except this time around, they've got information for you on CSS instead of the HTML. All right, we're going to look at a tiny bit more information before we go ahead and make changes to our fonts. And that is that there's a lot of things you can do. These are just a few properties of texts and fonts that they talk about, but you can do things like line height, letter spacing, font weight, text decoration, all of those things. And so if you want to try any of those, you can Google them and see what that'll look like or what code you need to put in there. We're mostly going to be working with color, font family, and possibly size. Okay. What it mentions down here in this note is if you want the font family to apply to your entire page, then you will put it inside the body rule set. So that's where we saw where the body with the 2 brackets. If you want to use different fonts for certain elements, so like maybe your header font will be different than your text font, like your paragraph font, which is what I plan to do, then you have to define and use specific rule sets. So you would have to go to your header 1 font and make that a specific font family, and then go to your paragraph text and set up a rule set for that text separately as well. Okay, and I will show you that, so don't worry if that sounds confusing. Okay, so now we're going to apply that in Trinket, and what I'm going to show you is how to change the font family and then to apply color. And I'll show you a few different places where you may need to do that. Now, if you're going to do the same font for all of your text, what you'll do is go into your project. Actually, we'll grab this from here. So we've got the font family information, and that's where we'll start. We won't put any color yet. So we'll go into our style sheet. And if you're only going to use this font for your entire body text, you can put that right here into the body text. Okay. And then it changes what that looks like. That is not what I'm planning to do. So I'm going to get rid of that and show you where I'm putting mine. Okay, so I'm going to start and I'm going to work with the header 1 font, just real quick. So I'm going to copy that information in there, but I don't want to use my Roboto font family for this particular text. I want to use my Oswald. So I'm going to change that, and that changes. Okay, so I also have my header 2 text. So I'm going to place this again. So go ahead right now and add in your font families inside your style sheet. And you'll need to take a look to know which ones you need to do. You'll need to take a look at what kind of text tags you've used. But primarily, you'll use body if you're doing all the same text family, or you'll use your header tags here, and you can add tags if you've used H4 or 5 or 6. Just copy this and change. You'll also want to think about your paragraph tags, okay? They will talk about the unordered lists a little bit later in the project, so you don't have to put this one in if you don't want to. All right, once you've done that, we are going to talk then about color. And this is where you're probably going to have to put in a few different things, so you may have chosen different colors for your text and your headings and things like that. I know I did for certain different areas. So what I'm going to do is go back to this. I'm going to grab that color property for my text, come back here, and then under my H1, I'm just going to go down a line, paste that. Now it's going to turn that white for now, but I don't actually want that to be white. I have a different color and a different hex code for that. All right, so I've got this pink color that I wanted for my H1 text. Let's take a look at some of the other pages, see where I might have used it. Okay, on my About page. For my H2 text, I want it to be a slightly different color. So you may not be able to totally notice the change, but this is now a brown instead of a black. Changed this as well. So I'm going to copy this. And if I don't use the H3 tag in any of my text, this won't matter, but it's there if I did use it. And I am going to make sure that is a slightly different color. I'm actually going to use the same color up here. And because there's none on this page, you won't see that change. That's okay. I'm then going to add in the color for my paragraph style, but I'm going to change that. Okay, so on this page, the only place where I've used the paragraph text, because this is the UL text, is down here. So you can see this is a lighter brown. And if I go to some of my other pages, you might see more. Well, that's an ordered list. Okay, so you see the paragraph text here takes on a different color. All right. So now is the point when you're going to want to add in those color changes to the different text, the font families, if you haven't already paused to do that. And you might also want to put in some of the different font options that are available in the PDF kit. So you may want to look at the text align. You may want to look at the font size and make those changes. Or like it says, you may want to look up a few that we don't even try today and add them yourself. So go ahead and do that now. Inside your style sheet, make those changes. And when we come back, we'll be moving on to those other two types of selectors that we spoke about just a little bit ago. Okay, so we're ready for step 4. And that's where we're going to practice styling elements with classes and IDs. So like I mentioned here, the first type that we talked about was the element selector. And that's where you choose the body or the H2, things like that. But if you want to do something different, like it says here, if you want the paragraph text at the top of your page to be orange and the paragraph text at the bottom to be teal, there are a couple different ways to do that. So you don't have to worry about being able to do that. Okay. So as they point out here, there are two parts to creating this. First, you need that ID or class element in your opening tag of the HTML, like you saw here. So we have to, instead of just being the regular open paragraph tab or tag, it will be P class equals bottom or P ID equals top, whatever that you use. You have to add that element because it specifies that this is different. And then you have to do like what we said here. You have to create that rule set that accompanies it. Okay, so put this in context. Think about the basic parts of your HTML element, okay? So all of this is an element. You've got your opening tag, your closing tag, and your content. To assign your class attribute, like it says here, you need the word class in there, okay? Then you put an equal sign, and then inside those quotation marks, you're going to add the name of the rule set. Okay, and so for this case, they've decided to name their rule set hello. Up here, the rule set is named top or bottom. Okay. And the same thing with an ID attribute, except instead of class, it says ID. Okay. So now it's going to show you how to create those specific rule sets in CSS. So for class, and there is a difference. So you use different signifiers for each one. For a rule set, for a class type rule set, you start out with a period and then the name. And then you have your brackets. And then you put the information inside the brackets that modify or that the rules that are used for that particular type. So if this was our top or bottom text to be, anytime I use the class equals hello or class equals top or class equals bottom, all this stuff inside here will take place. If you're going to use an ID rule set, you use a hashtag in front of the name, and then you make the changes inside here. Okay. Here's where it kind of tells you which one do you use, because you can use either. Which one? Okay. So the main distinction between them is that you use an ID selector if you are going to be using it one time to specify an element. Okay. And you use the class selector if you're going to use it multiple times within your document. And so we're going to try and describe what it is we're trying to do in a scenario, and then we'll see which one we need to use. Okay. So it says, in scenario 1, the subtitle looks the same as the rest of the text, but this is a special text. I want it to stand out. In fact, it's so special that I only want this subtitle to look this way on the page. It is singular, so I won't style anything else like it. If there's a bit of information that you want to stand out more than anything else, it's the only time you're going to use that specific styling on the page, then you want to use an ID attribute. Okay? And in this case, they're saying it is a specific subtitle. So we're going to create the rule set, which starts out with our hashtag, and we're going to call it subtitle because it's only for that subtitle. We're going to change our font size and the alignment. And then when we put it into that specific paragraph subtitle text, we have to add this here. Okay. In the second scenario, you want to add, you have to attribute an image. And maybe you have a few images, so you're putting a few different attributions on the page. And you want the attribution tags to all look the same. So you want to change the font size in this case. Because you'll be using it more than once, you want to use a class attribute. Okay? And it's the same thing, except when you create it, use the period in front. You put the specifics of what you want to be done to that text inside your element or your rule set, and then you add this to your opening tag in HTML. Okay? So here it tells you to try it out by adding a class or ID attribute to an element based on the needs of your project. And then you create a rule for it. So maybe you do have a certain header that you want to stand out in a different way, or maybe you have a certain bit of text that you want to highlight. Go ahead and create a class or ID attribute tag. What you'll want to keep in mind is this here. If it doesn't display the way you want it to, consider these issues and whether you've maybe missed something. They also mentioned a note about specificity here. So if you write two rules that conflict with each other, the browser is going to make one basically more important than the other. So like it says, rules written later in the CSS file will overwrite a previous rule. So if two rules conflict and one of them was later in your document, that's the one that will win out. And in this case, there's also the more specific element selector. If two rules are in conflict, the more specific one will work. So it says here, classes are more specific than elements, and IDs are more specific than classes. So if you use an element selector and you also have a conflicting rule with an ID selector, the ID selector is more specific, so it will be chosen. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to create that or where you might put that. I don't specifically need one for my project, but we'll try it out and see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use the ID selector type because I'm going to change one element on one of my pages. Okay. All right, so maybe I want to change the did you know to a different type of text or a different color. I'll change the did you know to a different color, and the did you know is the same as this one here, so that should be an H2, right? So it looks like this. Now if I want to change the color, I can go into the kit here, and they should have some, let's see if they've already created anything special. Okay, so they did. They created this one here. I'm going to copy that just to use the text. I'm going to put that in on my home page. I'm going to say it's under the subtitle. We'll just put that there. It's not a big deal, but I'm going to change the name to Did You Know. It doesn't need to be that long, but that just helps me know which one I'm using it for, okay? Now I don't want the text alignment in there. Or the font size. Actually, I'll leave those for now. What I really want is color. Okay, so I'm going to change my color here. I'm going to do just a color that's really random, that's not part of my project. Okay. So what I've done now is I've created the rule set. This will be like a blue is what it'll come up as. So I've made that rule set. Now what I need to do is I need to put the ID tag inside of the text that I want it to be. And it's on my index page. So what I'll do is go here. I've got this one here. So inside my opening tag, I'll put now let's take a look. See? I left in the center alignment and the padding, so it's created some space above the image. It changed the color to this blue. And it also centered it because it had that text alignment. Right? And it changed the font size. But it didn't change the font family because I didn't have any kind of element in there that changed that. So it's the same font family as it was supposed to be. I'm going to undo that because I don't want to keep that in mind, but that's an idea of what it looks like for you. All right, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and try that one out, and then we'll come back for step 5. All right, so we're ready to look at the box model. Okay. So right now we're going to talk about positioning the text because as you can see, it's still all hitting the one edge of the browser. So we're going to introduce us to the box model, which looks like this if you imagine it. So it helps you position your elements. And as a way to describe it is in the CSS box model, HTML elements are treated like boxes, and the element is wrapped in a series of boxes that specify the margin, the border, and the padding around the content. So that's what this looks like. There's your content, the padding, the border, and the margin. So it creates some kind of space. And they explain it this way. So the padding is a transparent or clear area around the content. Okay. Your border goes around the padding and the content. And your margin is a transparent or clear area, again, that goes outside of the border. And you can specify those things with the code that's listed here. Okay. We're going to position our header on the page, and what we want, and it may not be exactly what you want for yours, but to try this coding out, what they want to do is put the text in the central position. That's your desired header position, okay? So as they describe it, we want to center the header and give it some breathing room on the top and the left and right sides. We want it to be below the nav bar, but above the rest of the main body text, right? So it says that we don't really need a border for that. We don't need that line around there. So we're looking at the other two options, padding and margin. And to decide which one is more useful here, they're going to show us a comparison of what that looks like. Okay. So when you use the margin information, it doesn't do a lot to make a change. It might add maybe a little space, but it's not giving us the centered feel that we want. So for this, we have to use the padding element because the padding does make a difference. Okay. And here they have kind of a description of the differences between your margins and your padding and when you want to use them. Okay. So if you wanted to, you could create a different background color within your padding. So you'd have your header font here and you could change the background color. And that's something that you can do with your nav bar. These can stack on top of each other. They cannot have negative values, and that's something that we'll talk about when you're talking this information here. It adds to the area that can be clicked. So you can use padding to make buttons for your links and make that space bigger. And they can't overlap. It's very different with margins. Your margin is transparent. You can't see it. You can have them overlap each other. And it doesn't add any size to it. So it doesn't add any quality like this does. Now they've sourced this information from a tutorial on the box model. So if this is just not enough information for you or you want to understand it a little better, you can go ahead and click that link. Right. So here's the rule of thumb they explain. We use padding to give elements size and margin to separate elements. So padding gives it the size, margin separates. Okay. Says the padding property makes our header element bigger in order to position it on the page. So this actually takes up a little more space now, but it allows us to make this centered space. And the thing, because we're working with the whole header area, because we also have our, or you may or may not have your subhead or a bit of information inside your header, it will also affect any other elements that are inside that header space. If you have an image, it'll affect the image as well. So I'm going to show you how to do that in mine. Okay, and I'm going to take the code they used right from here and do the exact same thing. Okay, I'm going to go into my style sheet. Now, if I want to do that to every page, I could put it in the header space on my style sheet, and it will do it to all of them. Oh, it's telling me that I have duplicates here, so it wants to get rid of those before it will render the information. But there we go. Now the difference that I want to do, so if you look here, it is the information is centered on the page, but this text is still up against the left side of that padding, and I don't want it to be like that. So I'm going to add a little bit of text change to there. Let's see. So now my text is centered here. Now, if I don't like how this is done or that it's also centered like this, I can change these values here. So I can play with the numbers a little bit. And as you can see, that changes the alignment. Moves the text around a little bit. If I want it to be even, okay, I'm actually going to go a little bit smaller. And there we go. Go ahead and if you can try this out on your header if you like, or if you have a different part of your page that you want to be padded and in the center like this, you can try that too. Or if you're not planning to use this, go ahead and just try it out and see what it looks like, and then you can take it back out. But try and use that padding or margin box model information right now. And I'm going to go ahead and save mine and publish it so I can see how it looks. And you're welcome to do that between every step that we do, just so you can get a feel for how it looks on the full website. And remember, our links work as well, so you can see the other pages and how that's affected the header. I did not have header text on this page, but it did create that padding nonetheless. And here it created that padding around the About Me, which is the only thing I had in my header section. Okay. So I'm going to jump back on over to the PDF kit here. And have it ready to start step 6 when you guys have tested out the margins and the padding and the box model in general. It's time for step 6. So we're going to talk about styling our images. Okay. And the way that they have set their particular mockup is so that these images will display in the center of the page, and they will one on a line and go down in a horizontal row. And I will show you how to do that, like they've explained here, but I'm also going to show you how to do it as you saw in my final version here, where they're along side by side. And I did that by looking at that W3 schools extra information. But we'll go ahead and kick it off here. So to start, we need to tell it how we want it to display our images. Okay, and we're going to use their suggestion of displaying in a block. And what that means is that we want the image to start on a new line and take up the whole width of the page. Okay, so we're going to go inside the part 4 code. We're going to find the image section. So if you're up at the top, you're going to scroll all the way down until you see this section here. This is images and talks about setting your width, height, image attribution, all of that. So the first thing we need to take is the display block. And I will need to write this bracket myself. You want to make sure that the IMG is on the outside of the bracket, otherwise it will not work correctly, okay? So I go down to the images in mine, and I'm going to put IMG, put my bracket, put my display block. Okay. So my images are large because I've reset the sizing. If you remember before, they were a little bit smaller. I've reset the sizing so I can show you how to do it the way they want it done. But we've set up the display block first. Okay. And you can't tell yet because we need to resize it because they're pretty large. So we're going to go back here where it talks about sizing our image. Okay. So we can do that by using the width property in this case, and you can do it by pixel size or percentage value. And when you use the percentage, it basically tells the browser how much of the specified space to fill with that image. So like they say, if you use a width of 50%, the image is only going to be able to fill a maximum of half the size of the container that it's filling. And they say container, and that kind of means the area that you've told it to be in, inside the padding and all of those using the box model. Okay. And we're also going to set our height to auto. That allows it so when you see this in different sized screens, what the browser will do is it will decide how much space that width needs to fill, and then you want to keep the image ratio so it doesn't look squishy or like really, stretched and elongated. So by putting in auto, it'll keep the image ratio and make sure it still looks like it's supposed to. So we're going to go inside their code. Right underneath, we'll find our width and height. So we're going to take that information, and then we're going to find our style sheet. We're going to put that right in here. And it copied the comment as well, which is okay because remember this doesn't show up, so it can just stay there. Okay. All right. So now my pictures are a manageable size, and they're right on top of one another in this block. Okay, so you can go ahead and try that if you want to now. I'm going to show you the next little section on centering the image as well. So like it says, they may look centered in ours. It doesn't. It might be centered under this information here, but we can see that there's definitely space over to the sides. So what we need to do is put in a margin property so that there's space on either side of the image that kind of sets it in that center. Okay. And like it says, we can set specific margin right and left equal values, or we can make it auto so that, again, when the browser loads and it may have a bigger or smaller screen, it finds out what that value is and just sets it to that. Okay. So they've got an image rule set right here, which we saw when we looked at. So we've already got our display block, we've already got our width and our height, and we can change that width and height if we wanted to. So right here, I could go 50%. As you can see, it definitely changes the size of my images. Or you could also go pixels. I'll show you that real quick. So that's fairly small, 100 pixels. You see, I am actually going to let it sit at 75%. Okay. Then I'm going to go to their code, and I'm going to grab the margin information that we just saw here. It's the last part of ours. I'm going to copy that, and then I'm going to put that right inside my brackets. And then when it loads, now we can see that there is space on both the left and the right and that it is actually centered. And because we've put the margin top in here with the little pixels, there is now space between the images as well. And we can go ahead and take a look at that and what it'll look like on a full-size screen right here. See, the image is a lot bigger because my screen is a lot bigger, but I've still got this margin on the side and I've still got the space between my images. So if I want them to show up this big, I can leave it at 75. If I want it to be a little smaller, maybe I don't like that and I want to change it. I'm going to go inside my code if I want it to be smaller, and I'm going to put a width of 50% instead of 75, which makes it look really small on this screen, but when I save it and publish it, they're still fairly large images. They're just not as big as they were last time. Okay. Okay. So let's head back to our activity kit and see what we have left. All right, so before we jump into styling the navigational bar, it mentions here that you may want to finish any styling elements in your header or main elements, and so that's what we talked about in the last few steps. So if you haven't done that, this is the time to start doing all of those changes. Before we move on and before you pause, I am going to show you how to do the display a little bit differently. But I'm going to change it back to the percentage that they originally told us. Okay, so it'll look fairly large, remember. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to show you something that I found on W3 Schools. Okay, and that is how to place images side by side so that they look similar to this. Right, and if you remember, this is w3schools.com. If you type that in, you will find all of these different tutorials that they've got here, the HTML, CSS, tons of other programming languages that we're not working with today. But this particular one gives you the code that you would need to make it look like this. And basically all you would need to do is place this code inside of your project and then change your actual images, your image names, to match the ones that you're using. And so I'm going to do that now. All right, so if I go into my images here, let's find out where are they. All right, so I've got my images set up here. I'm going to set it inside, so it may show me a little broken image link, and that's fine because I don't want to get rid of this code just yet, okay? So it shows it's got row and column. I'm going to change first the name of my images to match these. So I'm just going to copy. Because as you can see over here, they're broken links because I don't have those particular images that they're talking about. All right, so it's showing that image now, and I'm going to change this. So it's got the style here, but what I'm actually going to do is just set the width and the height. Okay. So as you can see, it fits there like it's supposed to. It looks just like this original image here. Because it's fitting within, I still have that image information over here. Oh, let's scroll down and find it again. Since I still have this information here, it's still displaying as block. It's still doing 90% width with an auto height and this margin information. So it is still working within that information when I put width and height this auto, okay? I'm going to copy this and just put that in place so that when those images go in, it's the right information. And I can get rid of the alternative text because it doesn't match my images. You can leave the alt equals and just change to your alternative text. Just makes it easier. Okay, so my next image is my bathroom pass image. So I'm going to put that in here in place of forest. And then I'm going to get my last image right here and copy that into place of the mountain as well. Okay, so now I've actually got, once it loads, I've got six images. So what I can do then is I can delete my old image set. And now I've just got 3. And it looks exactly like it did before, because what we need to do now, if you remember, it's talking about the class tag, the class selector. So the first part of that is putting the class equals in here. We've got set it up as row as column, but remember we have to create the rule set in CSS. Okay, so that's what's missing, and that's why it's not yet showing up as a row and column. So because we're using a style set that goes exactly right here, we're going to go over here. And now where it says step 2, add the CSS, we're going to be using the float property as it mentions here. So I want 3 image containers, and that's why it's telling me to do 33.33 for the columns. If you wanted 4 images, you do 25%, and if you only have 2 images, you do 50. Okay, it's pretty simple. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take that column information. I'm going to copy it. And what this means is that it's setting it up so that the images will float next to each other. And then it creates a little bit of padding between. So I'm going to go ahead and find this here, and I'm just going to paste it right in. And it should, okay. So it has made a change. Right now, it's a little chaotic, and it's messing up some of our other stuff. Oh no, but that's okay. We still have to put in that second part to make them sit in a row, remember? So we go over here, we grab this rule set, and then we place that one inside of our style sheet as well. And suddenly, you'll notice the change it made is it's no longer running into the text is now underneath. So it has actually created a row. Right now it's displaying this way. So let's go ahead and take a look at what it's going to look like when it's published. All right. So it is looking this way. And the change that I'm going to tell you that I made to get mine to sit in alignment is to take out that padding in between. Because as we know, the padding creates actual space, whereas a margin does not. And we learned that when we learned the box model. So I'm going to go ahead and just take out that padding. And there are my 3 images right in a row. All right. So if you want to, you can use that, and that is practice in using your class selectors. Remember that one uses the period, and the ID selector uses the hashtag. So now you've seen both. All right, so now is the time when you should go in, make changes to your images, make sure that you have any other styling elements you want to do to your text or colors. You do that now. The next step when you come back, we'll be working on the nav bar, so don't worry about that still looking a little wonky. I would suggest definitely using the W3 schools to find things that you want to do that they haven't shown, because the Girls Who Code project is doing the very basics that you need to know. And this stuff is a little more complicated, and you may want to do some things that are very different. Okay, so I'm going to head back over here, and we will take a few seconds so that you guys can pause and make your changes, and then when you come back, we'll work on the nav bar. Okay. It's time to start styling our navigational bar. Okay. All right. So they're going to show us how to do a horizontal navigational bar, so across the top. But there are many different ways that you can do it, including vertical. And so they mention the W3 schools again as well. If you want to do a navigational bar that maybe goes down the side of your page instead of across the top, or creating a menu item or something like that, you can look up the coding for that in that particular project. Okay, but we're going to stick with just across the top right now for simple. So remember, if we look at our code for our navigational bar, it's just a list of links. Very similar to the checklist that we did on our action page. Okay, so what we need to do is start styling those different elements that make that up. So our unordered list tag, our list item tag, and our anchor tag or link element. Okay. So it mentions here removing the bullets. Mine wasn't showing bullets when I was using it in the results page. So you may not need this, but we're going to go ahead and put it just in case, because you never know, it may decide to render that when you don't want it. Okay. So they say we're going to take the list style type property and going to put it with a value of none, so it doesn't show us any bullets. Okay. We also have the option to do a background color. You may not want to, but I'm going to use a background color, not their background color, but I'm going to use a color from my scheme to set the navigational bar apart. Okay. And then it has overflow. If anything overflows, it's hidden. All right, so we're going to go to their code and find the navigational bar. So it looks a little bit different in here, and it'll explain that in a second. We'll get to that step. So first, this is the items for the nav bar. So we're going to take the list style type, the background color, and the overflow. We're going to copy that. Okay. Then we're going to go to the navigational section of our style sheet. See right here. And we're going to do, for the unordered list, we're just going to put it right in here for now. That information. Oh, and now I've got teal on my, okay. So as you can see, it made the changes with our color. What it did was it put the background color on my nav bar, but it also put it down here because I also have an unordered list here. And I don't want that. So we'll fix that in a little bit, and they'll talk about that in a second, which is why they had a slightly different look to their bracket. I'm going to get rid of this color. Oh, that was a weird green. Okay, so my background is going to be my light brown shade. Okay. So right now it's only changing the background color and taking away the bullets for this. Let's go back to our PDF and see what they tell us to do next. All right, so now it wants us to style the list element. So that's the individual lines. And what we want it to do is we want it to display in a horizontal line rather than stacked on top of each other. So we're going to use the display inline. Remember before we used the display block value for our images, but this one we want to be inline. Okay, so we have to add that rule set. And we use the float property that we saw when we found how to do our images in a horizontal line. And it's telling it to float right. So they'll float alongside of each other, and it'll float on the right side of the page. So I'm going to go ahead and find that inside their code under their list item. So we're going to use the display inline and the float right. And that will put it on the right side of the page like they show here. So that's going to go inside my list elements. Okay, so we can see that they are right over here. But if you're noticing, they're all kind of running together and they have no space between them. This is a very small line. So let's see what the activity kit tells us next. Okay, ours looks just like this, so we're at least on the right track. All right, so now we're going to start styling the list elements with a link in them. And what they're talking about here is that there's a specific section that talks about line items that have a link in them. So we only want those specifically to be changed. And we need to be very specific, because if we don't make sure that it's only the list items that have hyperlinks in them, then it will do it to every list item that we have in our whole project. And we don't want to do that. Okay, so in doing this, we're going to create padding so that it will create kind of like a button space around it. And we don't want to do that in our checklist, right? We already saw it's got a different background color, and we'll have to fix that in a second. Alrighty, so we're going to go inside of their code, and we're going to go down to list elements with a link tag. And we're going to choose this information here. And then we're going to move over to here, and we're going to go down to our list elements with a link tag. Now, I do need to change this a little bit, because I'm not talking about the top padding so much as all the padding, right? Okay. So now we've got some space between those. All right, so we're making a little bit of progress. This is still getting a little bit messed up because it's showing list items and it's having them float right. So obviously we're going to have to fix this, right? Because this is not what we want. But right now we're still focused on our nav bar. So I'm going to change the text color. All right, so now the text in my navigational bar is going to show up as a cream color. Okay. So now that we've done that, let's go back to our PDF kit. All right, now they're telling us we want to make a styling change to let people know that they can, click on that bit of text and that it's actually a link rather than just text that's there. So we're going to change it so that when they hover over it, it changes color slightly, okay? So we'll go inside here and we'll find the hover, okay? And we'll see what that does, because I'm sure it has a very different background color than I want. All right, let's see what happens. Okay. All right, so when I hover it over it, the text turns yellow and the background turns blue, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the background color. So let's see what it did. All right, as you can see, the text still turns yellow, but the background changes to this pink color that matches my header text. And then I can go ahead and change the color for the actual link text itself. All right, moment of truth. There we go. So you might not be able to see a distinct difference, but the background of the link button changes to this color, and the text changes to the background color of the page. All right, so we've done a lot of stuff. Let's go back to our PDF and see what it tells us to do next. All right, it actually wants us to try it out. So let's see what that looks like. We're going to go ahead and save, which we haven't done in a few minutes. And we're going to share. And we're going to take a look at that page. All right, so it's looking a little different. We still got some issues to fix, but and as we can see, because we just did the unordered list items for this, it has also significantly changed my checklist. So we're going to have to fix that as well. But we know the links still work. All right. Let's go back to our PDF and see what they say. All right, so they're going to talk about now the issue that we're seeing. The nav bar looks great, but that take action page, our checklist is a mess. Okay, so what they're going to have us do is use a class selector to make changes to those elements, the unordered list, the list elements, and things like that, so that we don't have that problem. So that our nav bar will still look the way we want it to, but it doesn't affect the checklist. Okay. So this is where we see the items that we saw inside of their code that has the nav bar attachment or the nav item attachment. So we're going to have to go ahead and change those names inside the CSS. So we'll go here and look at the way that they've got it looking. Okay, so it's .nav item, right? So just make these changes. So I'm going to go into mine and I'm going to make those changes. So I've added it here, and the reason that it's not showing up now and it's changed that element even on the navigational bar is because I only have the first part of the solution. So I've put in here, but I also need to remember to put in my class here. And remember, you look here, I've done that to the unordered list item, which means I need to go into my nav bar unordered list and put class equals nav-bar. And there we go. Now we've got that color back. Okay. So here we need to do similar about dash nav dash item, right? And so now it changes everything. It's like, oh no, this is back over here, but this is back over there too. So now we just need to go in to our list items. And then it starts doing what we want, right? We need to do that to each list item in the opening tag. And then it starts doing what we want it to do. So as you can see, coding can be a little tricky. You have to be very specific. Otherwise, it will apply what you put in there equally to everything, and it can get a little chaotic. So if you're having any problems, you can always go back to the video. You can look at your sheet, or there's always the W3 schools for help. Okay. Now we're not done. Remember, we have to make sure we hit all of the items. So we also have this link information here. So we want to go in down to this. Now the one thing we'll have to look at is that if we look at this page, it's not the same. So we have to individually add all of that into each page. So I'm just going to copy it from my index page. And then I'm going to find the same information over here, my nav bar, and I'm going to paste. And then suddenly, my nav bar is on that page. Okay. All right, now I've got my nav bar on all of my pages, and I'm good to go. So I know we just went over a lot of information in the nav bar section because there's a lot to do there, but that's okay. If you need to, you can pause at any time, go back, rewatch a section. All of what I'm doing is straight on the PDF activity kit, so you can go there for questions. And as always, you can always look at the W3 schools for more information or for troubleshooting. Okay. So I'm going to go back to the PDF kit, pause for a little bit so you guys can pause the video and make those changes to your navigational bar, and then we'll move on to styling our checklist. Okay, now it's time to style the checklist on the action page. Okay. All right. So we need to style our checklist, and right now we should have a div tag around that checklist inside of our code to create a container for that group, which in their case uses the H3, the unordered list, and the list elements. Mine has an H2 instead. So they're saying is we want to style this container that we've created with the div tag, but if we just use the div tag and make changes to that, we'll have a problem because we use that on other items like our images. So we can't do just an element selector. We have to do a class or an ID. In this case, they suggest using an ID tag because we only have one checklist on the take action page. You may have more. I don't know. Okay, so we need to add a new rule set. So let's head over to theirs and see what they've got going on for the take action page. Okay, so they've got an ID selector rule set, and they've done a lot of stuff. Let's see how that looks on their page. Okay, so they've set theirs up in this box here. The white background, blue text, and a yellow border. And you can do that if you like. We're going to follow along with theirs for now. Okay, so the first thing we'll do is copy this. And we'll go down to our style sheet and we'll find the take action section where it says checklist. And we'll start with that. Okay. So now that we've got the rule set started, we're going to do the basics, and I'll go back to this real quick, but we're going to talk about the color and the shape. So we'll go ahead and we'll add a background color, a color, and then do some width and padding if you want to do that. If you want it to be the width of the whole page, you don't need to add this. Okay? So let's go back to their code and see what they've done. All right, so if I put that inside my checklist element, it's not showing anything yet because I haven't actually put in the information here. So they've gone in the div and class, so we only have to put one in, and that's really simple. So I'm just going to do that real quick. Go to my own. And I should see the changes that I first start. Okay, there we go. All right, let's go ahead and set my background to cream. The same color that I used as my navbar text. Let's go ahead and take a look at their checklist and see if they have anything else. So we can try this, see what it looks like. All right, so when I put in the width and the margin information, it makes it so that this is a checklist just in the middle of the page, this tiny little box. Okay. So let's see how that looks if I publish it. All right, so if I go to my take action page where I will have that set up, it looks like this. Box in the middle of the page. And I don't think that looks too bad, so I'm going to leave that in. Essentially what it did in my style sheet was I added just some margin information. Okay. Back over to the PDF. They're going to show us that in their particular version, they added some other properties like border. So if we look at their .image, if we look at their coding, we can see that they've got a border style, border color, then width and radius for that. So we could add that if we wanted. And I'll just go ahead and add that to mine to show you what that could look like if you decide to add it in yours. It's going to look a little funny on mine since I don't have yellow on my page at all. But you could do that. And if you choose to save that and then share it, this is what it will look like on your final product. See? So then you've got that border. And you can add that if you like. All All right, we're going to head back over here. This is the last section. So once you finish styling your checklist on your Take Action page, you've done everything that is covered in this week's project. Okay, so go ahead and take you back there and look, because feels like we covered a lot. This is all the different types of stuff that they've done to their checklist. You can use this. Remember that you'll have to go ahead and put it in using the class information, and that's going to go into your div tag. So in mine, that looks like this. I've used their similar, and then I've placed it in here. So if you had a checklist before and you did not have a div tag around it, you can go ahead and add that. This would be your opening tag, and this is your closing tag. Okay. I am going to go ahead, and so the next step of it is just basically sharing your project. So if you want to go ahead and do that, you can share it with Girls Who Code. I've got the information that we're familiar with back over here. So that hashtag and that @ tag. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I will say that the issue that I had the most was putting in the code and then realizing I'd done something a little bit wrong, and then having to, make minute changes by looking at the results page or publishing it. So there will be a lot of back and forth. This process may take you a little bit of time, but it's your website, so it can look however you want. So if you decide you want to make some changes to the final product that you didn't have in your mockup, or take out some things that you had in your mockup that maybe you're just not finding the right elements to make work, that's totally fine too. Okay. I hope you guys weren't too overwhelmed with this information, and I hope that you enjoyed creating a stunning website that's got all these colors and fonts and style sizes and things like that. If you guys have stuck around this far, hopefully you will come back and join us for the final video in 2 weeks' time, where we will learn how to do, like I mentioned before, optimizing for different size screens and for different types of devices. Thanks for joining me this week, and I'll see you again soon.